A new lawsuit has just been filed that names Jennifer Lopez as a material witness in the crimes that Diddy committed, and allegedly J.Lo knew what Diddy was doing to minors, but refused to stop it. More and more witnesses are coming forward, and there are reports that 8 freak-off tapes along with 11 flash drives have been handed over to the FBI.
But going back to Cardell Smith's filing, his notice says that Jennifer Lynn Lopez, a.k.a. J.Lo, a.k.a. Jenny from the Block, quote, will be called as a material witness and expert to Sean Combs' viewing, possession, and distribution of his sexual assault upon the plaintiff in 1997 and the orders of defendant Sean Combs forcing Jennifer Lopez to remain silent about the videotaped sexual assault of plaintiff by defendant. Plaintiff states that the material witness Jennifer Lynn Lopez, also known as J.Lo and Jenny from the Block, was engaged in a relationship with the defendant Sean Combs during 1999 and 2001, and that the sexual assault of the plaintiff was recorded, distributed, and held by the defendant at his New York residence and recording studio. And during the relationship with Jennifer Lopez, she was made privy to this video that was taken by Sean Combs and his employee Kirk Burrows. She, J.Lo, has known this video existed and was in existence and took no action to make it known to anyone in law enforcement, and that she was even questioned by New York Police Detective Derek Palmer about this matter, and that the report will show that her answers to this tape was and still remains a resounding yes to its existence. And again, Cardell Smith writes that he wants to call Officer Derek Palmer as a witness because he says Palmer is the one who questioned Lopez and believes that he will have testimony that could help his case. Now, as I mentioned, Diddy's legal team has called for this entire case to be thrown out. Cardell Smith has filed a massive response to that request that totaled more than 200 pages. Probably half of it was just straight up copies of case law that seems to support his arguments, word for word. It's something out of like a legal textbook. There's so much to slog through, but I kind of want to give you some of the highlights. So first, in addition to the claims of rape and a cover-up, Cardell Smith also claims and alleges that Combs was violent towards his loved ones. At times, Cardell Smith addresses alleged threats against his family. Other times, he says Combs actually caused serious injuries to his brother. His response reads, defendant used threats of murder to force the plaintiff to not bring the case to any court of law enforcement until the homes of the defendant were raided by Homeland Security, that the plaintiff knew it was a safe time to bring the case, and that is why we are here at this juncture. And Cardell Smith argued that fear for his own safety and the safety of his family is one of the main reasons that he waited so long to report the alleged rape, and says that that reason alone should override any issue with the statute of limitations, that these claims might otherwise be time barred. And he also argues that while he's been in prison, fellow inmates and prison guards have threatened him on behalf of Sean Combs.
Diddy's ex-wife Kim Porter was allegedly writing a book that was going to expose Diddy, and that's why he got her killed. This book contains details of how Diddy ran his sex trafficking operation, and after her death was thought to be lost. Now a close friend of Kim Porter, Courtney Burgess, has decided to come forward and hand over Kim Porter's memoir to the FBI.
And those statements include descriptions of what the witness says he saw on those tapes. So I asked him about that, and he answered what he could, given the limitations imposed on him after testifying before the grand jury. Out of those 8 videos, 8 celebrities, 6 men and 2 women, how many of those 8 celebrities were close to being underage or potentially underage?
2 males.
2 males. And of those 8 celebrities, how many of them were intoxicated or under the influence of drugs?
This is going to be all speculation. I just want to preface it by he wouldn't know if they were. Right.
Sure.
Appear to
Let
be.
me rephrase it.
Based on, yes.
Understand. Out of the 8 celebrities who were recorded having intimate relations with Sean Combs, how many of them appeared to be either inebriated or intoxicated or under the influence of drugs?
All of them. All of them.
Out of those 8, how many appear to be potentially victimized? How many might have been victimizing?
I think all, to be honest, all.
Were victims
They
or
victims.
were perpetrating?
Victims.
They were, all 8 were victimized.
Yeah,
meaning
victim.
this was happening to them and they were inebriated.
Right. Not knowing, I guess, how much proof it was in it, what they was doing.
Courtney claims that Kim Porter gave him 11 flash drives that contained her memoir and 8 of Diddy's freak-off tapes. All of this has now been handed over to the FBI. Courtney is being subpoenaed in a federal criminal trial, and the tapes he presented have allegedly been played in front of a grand jury. Kim Porter gave these tapes to Courtney because she knew that her life was in danger. Unnamed celebrities that helped Diddy set up and control his criminal empire have been mentioned in this memoir, and the show key figures in Hollywood and the music industry engaging in sexual contact with minors.
Is your client fearful if Diddy does get out?
As you know, I represent other clients, actual victims who have sued Mr. Combs, Diddy, in civil court, and all of them are very apprehensive about their safety if he were to be granted bond. I am confident in the court. I am sure that the court will remain with their previous decision of no bond. I feel like the judge only gave this, let me think about it, just to not make it as obvious. But I have all the confidence in the world and the federal court and the state of New York that they will remain keeping Diddy under no bond, and that all of the victims in this case will be able to proceed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I mean, you don't just represent this man, you represent other alleged victims too and people involved. Have there been any threats made against any of your clients?
There have been threats from people on the internet, but not from, at least what we don't know, from Diddy to be directly. So my clients have, Mr. Burgess has received several death threats. My client, Mrs. Parham, has been receiving threats, but we don't know if they're just regular people from the internet or if they're actually people who were sent by Diddy.
Do you have any idea where the threats are coming from? I mean, have you done any investigation?
Well, most of the investigation leads us to a lot of burner accounts on Instagram, and we're trying to now sift through possibly working with law enforcement to try to get subpoenas to determine the IP addresses of where those threats were emanating.
So, okay, interesting. We know that the cease and desist letter has now come. Has there been any other pressure of any kind that you or your clients have felt to stop talking?
In general, I feel that the gag order, when we talk about that, Mark Agnifilio wrote about me specifically, and also all of the other plaintiffs in the civil lawsuits to try to have all of us gagged. There's pressure every day that us continuing to talk about this is putting not only our lives in jeopardy, but could be potentially used against us in a gag order.
Sons have acknowledged the fact that this memoir exists and are trying to do whatever they can to get their hands on it. Shockingly, however, these people don't even care what their mother wanted to say in her memoir and are only interested in the money they might make if this book gets published.
He says he owns the rights to a book that was reportedly based on the alleged memoir of Kim Porter. In fact, according to TMZ, Burgess' phone was seized by the feds, and on it was a copy of a flash drive with material that was used in this book. Here's the problem. Christian and Quincy Combs, these are the sons of Diddy and Kim Porter. Quincy's actually adopted by Diddy. But they are reportedly fighting back, and they have sent Burgess a cease and desist letter to prevent the further sale of this book. They argue this is just an attempt to capitalize on Porter's fame and that they own the rights to her IP, her intellectual property, like her diary entries, her potential manuscript. As her heirs, they own it. And they also want an accounting of current sales of the book. To be clear, though, they aren't acknowledging that there is, in fact, a long-lost memoir from their mother. In fact, they've actually denied that before when there was a similar book, a derivative work, we'll talk about that, published by this guy named Chris Todd on Amazon. They were adamantly fighting against that. They said that their mother wouldn't write this. But what they're basically saying is if something should exist, they own it. Burgess has
New keeps piling up against Diddy, and at this point, a clear pattern has emerged in the abuse that Diddy carried out. For Diddy, rape wasn't about sexual attraction, but instead about domination. He wanted to feel like he was in control, and he wanted to humiliate everyone else. A recent lawsuit was filed against Diddy on behalf of 3 men that he allegedly raped back in 2006. According to one of the victims, Diddy and others from Bad Boy Entertainment took turns raping him after giving him a spiked drink that made him lose consciousness.
So why did you believe in these cases, and why didn't you believe in others that you were presented with?
Well, the thing with a abuser, a sexual abuser, is they follow a pattern. They fall to type, and you become very clear on what that pattern is, particularly a serial sexual abuser. And these cases were all identical in the facts, identical in the story. It was beginning, middle, conclusion.
They know each other?
Boom. None of them knew each other.
Did you have them meet?
No.
Did you have them coordinate stories?
No, no.
Do you think they had any contact with each other before they came to you?
Absolutely not.
And when you were talking to them, well, first, the ones that you didn't take, why not?
Stories didn't make sense. Stories didn't fit the pattern. Stories were not credible. I mean, this is my 30th year as a lawyer. I've tried over 100 cases. I can assess whether somebody's story is credible. And if I don't believe it, I'm not going to put my name on a pleading, sign it, and file it in court. I'm not doing that. And that's what I did with the 60-plus cases that I rejected.
And this is not really your area of expertise. If people look you up, celebrity lawsuits is not really where you make your bones. Why this?
Well, I was involved in the Weinstein litigation. Right. I was involved in the Paducah litigation. I was involved in the Hayden litigation. Why did I do this? I do this because it's important. I think it's important for people to be heard, have their chance to get the power back. Because sexual abuse, sexual assault is about one thing: taking power, humiliating, demeaning a person and a victim. It has nothing to do with sex. And so I think it's important. I think it's important to get the word out. I think it's important for men to feel, hey, look, I can come out and be heard just like a woman could.
And the defense that, look, they knew what they were getting into. These are regrets. They went there, they partied, and now they see a pocket.
No, I don't think so. My client
was... Were they gay men?
One was bisexual, the other ones were not. And they were going there. The client was bisexual, worked for Diddy. Diddy owed him money for doing errands for him and being his step and fetch, for lack of a better word. And I think it was a power move. It was a clear power move because this guy had the nerve to come to him and say, you owe me money. And so Diddy said, come on to the Intercontinental Hotel. He gives him the drug, knocks him out, sodomizes him. And I won't use the term that my client used, but he said he tried to turn me into his B word. And I think it was a clear power move on each and every occasion. I think the ones that took place in the Park Hyatt, that wasn't partying. My client met him at a nightclub in the city here with a music producer. He didn't think he was getting into that. The man who was raped in the Hamptons, he thought he was going to a white party. Who wouldn't want to go to a white party? I would have gone to a white party back in the day. I wouldn't go now. But they went there innocently, and this is what happened to them.
I never went. I appreciate you very much. We will follow the cases.
Ariel Mitchell, a lawyer representing an A-list celebrity that Diddy abused, has also come forward regarding the existence of Diddy's freak-off tapes and says that someone actually reached out to her to try and sell a Diddy tape. Ariel's client also alleges that they were sexually abused by Sean Diddy Combs as a minor after being drugged, in her own words. Ariel has said that she is worried about what Diddy might do to her and has started carrying a gun to keep herself safe. Since filing the lawsuit, she's been threatened by people claiming to be connected to Diddy.
Is your client fearful if Diddy does get out?
As you know, I represent other clients, actual victims who have sued Mr. Combs, Diddy, in civil court, and all of them are very apprehensive about their safety if he were to be granted bond. I am confident in the court. I am sure that the court will remain with their previous decision of no bond. I feel like the judge only gave this, let me think about it, just to not make it as obvious. But I have all the confidence in the world and the federal court and the state of New York that they will remain keeping Diddy under no bond, and that all of the victims in this case will be able to proceed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you don't just represent this man, you represent other alleged victims too, and people involved. Have there been any threats made against any of your clients?
There have been threats from people on the internet, but not from, at least what we don't know, from Diddy to be directly. So my clients have, Mr. Burgess has received several death threats. My client, Mrs. Parham, has been receiving threats, but we don't know if they're just regular people from the internet or if they're actually people who were sent by Diddy.
Do you have any idea where the threats are coming from? I mean, have you done any investigation?
Well, most of the investigation leads us to a lot of burner accounts on Instagram, and we're trying to now sift through possibly working with law enforcement to try to get subpoenas to determine the IP addresses of where those threats were emanating.
So, okay, interesting. We know that the cease and desist letter has now come. Has there been any other pressure of any kind that you or your clients have felt to stop talking?
In general, I feel that the gag order, when we talk about that, Mark Agnifilio wrote about me specifically, and also all of the other plaintiffs in the civil lawsuits to try to have all of us gagged. There's pressure every day that us continuing to talk about this is putting not only our lives in jeopardy, but could be potentially used against us in a gag order.
I also was just recently contacted by someone who wanted me to essentially represent them in the sale of one of the Diddy tapes.
You're saying that there's tapes and they're being shopped?
Yes, there have been people already shopping.
We've heard about the tapes, but
yes.
The shopping thing is...
Yes, there already have been tapes leaking around Hollywood, being shopped around to individuals in Hollywood. But one particular person contacted me to shop a particular video they were in possession of, and to contact the person who was in the video to see if they were interested in purchasing the video before it became a public knowledge.
I've heard this before, so like a catch and kill.
Catch and kill, correct.
Wow. Can you, and I guess you can't reveal the person who is on
No,
this
I can't
tape.
Explain who the person was, but Mr.
High profile?
Mr. Combs was in the tape, and this other person is, I would venture to say, more high profile than Mr. Combs.
Federal prosecutors and criminal defense attorneys have all said that at this point Diddy's only option is to start cooperating with the feds. The amount of video evidence and witness testimonies connecting him to these crimes is too much to fight against, and with almost 40 cases filed against him right now, it makes sense for Diddy to be worried. One of the FBI officers who was present at Diddy's mansion during the raid in 2024 says that the things they saw at Diddy's house were horrifying.
These ladies at a party, for years, P. Diddy's gotten a hall pass. He's actually created his own kingdom where he makes his own rules, and you got to follow his rules or you get penalized. And guess what, Laura? He's now in a federal penitentiary, and for the first time in his life, he's facing his own fate at the hands of somebody else. And I will tell you, Laura, I've done federal cases, that's not the place you want to be in federal court. 90% of federal criminal indictments brought down are pled out, right? A plea deal is brought. And of the only 10% left, 90% of those defendants that go to trial, they lose. So he is looking at a daunting uphill battle to fight these horrible charges.
Now, Brian, one of the DHS agents involved in this raid on his Miami mansion described what he saw inside the house, saying that, in my opinion, he's as bad as Epstein. These women are young, either barely legal or barely illegal. Brian, this sounds like he was a monster.
Yeah, Laura, I will tell you that this indictment was very detailed, by the way, too. Your viewers should know there were over 300 subpoenas served, over 50 witnesses interviewed. Why is that important? Because the federal prosecutors aren't going to be leveling an indictment like this unless they have ammunition and they have cause to bring it. And the core issue at this case, which the feds have to prove, which it's looking like they can, is that P. Diddy essentially controlled these women, that he threatened them with stopping the money that he was paying them, that he spiked their drinks with drugs, that's been alleged in the indictment, and that he basically told them, I'm going to ruin your life unless you engage in these freak offs. And that's really what the prosecutors got to prove. And if you've got some victims coming forward to talk about that, you've got financial records that prove that, travel itinerary that proves that, P. Diddy has very little defense. And I got to tell you, Laura, if this guy wants to fight these charges, he's going to have to step up and walk into a courtroom and talk about it. If he doesn't testify in this case, he is dead on arrival.
Well, who else is on these tapes? I mean, will the tapes ever see the light of day? I mean, that's what everybody's talking about. Who else is there? It's like with the Epstein, his pleasure island. Who else? Who went? Who was there? What's the manifest? But Brian, chances 1 being least likely, 10 being most likely, will we learn of other celebrities that were at these freak-offs?
Yeah, I think you've got an 8 or a 9 for a likelihood you're going to hear about it. Why? Because there are going to be more indictments coming down, Laura. That's an important point here, because he's being charged with racketeering and conspiracy. You're going to have, well, let's start on the inner circle. You're going to have former bodyguards. You're going to possibly have former musicians that he was with. You've got personal assistants that are going to be, they're already talking about this. Some of those are likely to be charged. And then guess what? If you've got some music moguls that are sending women over to these alleged freak-offs, then you've got some top people that are going to start crumbling too, because they're all part of what's called this criminal enterprise.
Former federal prosecutor Neela Romani said that Diddy and Jay-Z are only the first people connected to this sex trafficking ring to get exposed since his interview with Jennifer Lopez. And T.D. Jakes has also been named in lawsuits, and with Ashton Kutcher now prepared to testify against Diddy, it looks like Diddy's time is finally up.